All right, welcome to Lodome's Connect Future APAC edition. I am Alex Terrio, Chief Customer Officer at Lodome. We're going to be covering a lot of ground over the next 75 minutes. First, we're going to start with a presentation from Lodome's VP of Product, Pierre DNA. And then we are going to transition over to a panel where we've invited some industry experts ranging from both the buy to the sell side to cover and discuss the cookieless future. Quick reminder before we jump in, please do use the question box versus the chat feature. We're going to be following along any questions that are submitted throughout the event today. We'll be covering the end of the session. Any questions that we don't have time to get to will be our executive summary report that we will be sending out post-event. So to kick things off and provide a bit more background on Lodome, I'm going to hand things over to Lodome's founder and CEO, Andy Monfried. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you, Alex. And I want to thank everybody for being a part of this and for logging in and for being a part of this on December of 2020, this ending of a crazy year. But we are so excited to be hosting this. And I always say the most valuable thing we can expect from anybody is their time and attention. And it means the world to me personally and to everyone in my company for you to be a part of this. Lodome started in 2006. It was started because I had a dream that the power of data, coming off of my experience of helping to build one of the largest ad networks in the world, the power of data was not being utilized. And we were the first company to start an audience-driven data network. That the only thing we used was the underpinning of social data. And we pivoted from that ad network and we closed it and we turned it into the first DMP. And now we're the largest independent DMP. We then pivoted and opened up a data exchange globally, the largest third-party data exchange. And something I'm so proud of. And that was followed by, on the heels of, opening up in Latin America and more specifically across Asia. And we've doubled down on the Asia continent. We've opened offices in Sydney. We opened offices in Mumbai. We often opened offices in Singapore. And I couldn't be more proud of our team and how our culture has evolved. The culture that we started across the pond has moved over there. And I want to tell you today, we're the global data enrichment solutions company. I want to emphasize that. We focus on first-party data, second-party data, and also third-party data. But what we do and what at the heart of what the value we've created is to become the best, the fastest, and really the most amazing clients globally. Clients in the Asia region, like P&G, like IBM, like Omnicom, like SPH, MediaCorp, Countdown. I can go on and on. But we have a great partnership with our clients, and each use case varies. And how we help them manage first-party data and do the activation. How we help them in their identity issues. How we help them with the cookieless future. And that's a little bit about what you're going to hear today. So there's three key components that you're going to come away with today. One is the data strategy. What is the data strategy for your company and ours? The second one is, what does data enrichment mean? And the third one is, what is identity? And how does Lodome play a part in it? But this is the most important aspect if you take nothing else away on the personal and professional level. We're going to help through the next 60 minutes make you smarter. I want you to ask questions. It's not only about making you smarter, it's about helping take and transition that knowledge that we want you to get from where we're going and the value we're creating into helping your company future-proof not only you personally, but your business, your job, the company you work for, differentiating your brand. And that's what Lotame is all about. Since its inception, we've put people first. And differentiation is the key to the entire premise of what we're doing. So as Pierre takes you through this next phase of our business, and as Pierre and the panel who we've amassed, and I want to thank the panel for being a part of this and their participation, I really want you to come away at the end of this call, at the end of this experience, with how do I engage Lotame around Panorama ID? How do I engage Lotame on audience enrichment? How do I engage Lotame better, more clearly to drive activation and results for myself and my business? So again, I want to thank you. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart on behalf of all of our global employees for being a part of this. And I look forward to your participation, and hopefully at the end, you come away with a little bit more than when you started. So without further ado, I want to pass the baton back over to Pierre to kick us off, or Alex. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Andy. So just to set the stage for a deeper dive into the Lotame Panorama Suite, I'd like to introduce just a few product enhancements that we rolled out over the past 12 months. First, we have a Lightning Tag, which is our superior data collection and activation vehicle. This lightweight JavaScript is able to collect not only third-party, but also first-party cookies and pass that into activation platforms in real time. Then we have Cartographer, which is our people-based graph. So as you can see in this image, what we're looking at is different interests and attributes that are associated to a consumer's devices. Things like interests in music or art, which can look very different than financial planning or where to get a local coffee or pint. Without the ability to stitch all these different interests and attributes together and back to a consumer, it's really difficult to have a complete panoramic view of that consumer. So both Lightning Tag and Cartographer are foundational to our ability to offer and maintain those data enrichment capabilities for direct and programmatic inventory targeting and planning. That, as well as being able to offer addressable audience-based analytics, all in a cookieless world. So without further ado, I'd like to pass things over to Lotame's VP of Product, Pierre Diane. Welcome, Pierre.
Thanks, Alex. Thank you. Yeah, so just to echo what Alex was saying about the latest upgrades to our platform, this is what I tell folks when they ask about Lightning Tag and Cartographer product, is that Lotame is upgrading the platform right underneath you. We're asking you to create the latest tag and the latest graph so that we can offer you a people-based, real-time data management or data solutions platform for you. And we hope that you will upgrade as soon as possible, because there's some really exciting capabilities that are built right into and the people-based graph. Today, I'm about to tell you about one of those very exciting capabilities that is enabled by our people-based graph. So I want to do a little preamble. This has been a really crazy year. I think for every single one of us, we have been disrupted in our business, in our technology, in our lives. Andy likes to tell folks that about my story, which is I was living in New York City in March of this year, very big, one of the largest cities in America. And the pandemic hit and various things changed in my life, and I needed to move. And I went to Georgia, which is a primarily rural state in the south of the United States. And I very far from the latest city or nearest city in a really wonderful rural community. And I love it, but it's a massive change for me. And I think what I did was I kind of took charge of the disruption. I made lemonade out of the lemons. And I think this quote really speaks to what Lotame's position with all of this disruption going on. It's really evened the playing field, and we're leaning right into this disruption, saying, you know what, this is our opportunity. So what is the opportunity? If you think about all the things that are happening to cookies and the IDFA restrictions coming out from Apple and privacy regulations around the world, what In summary, I call it as it's a threat to the third-party tracking. The idea that one can track a user or track behavior or readership, viewership across domain, device, and platform. And all of these privacy regulations are an actual what I don't think those privacy regulators intended, which is to drive market share towards the big walled gardens and kind of eviscerate or overburden these independent publishers and platforms. So Lodomi has a solution. What we don't think is the right way to go, at least not alone, is this first-party data-only strategy. A lot of entities are reacting to privacy regulation by saying, well, you know, Facebook's a walled garden, Google's a walled garden. I will make a walled garden too. I'll create my own little silo of first-party data and never share it out. The only problem is that it doesn't permit for most of the brand marketer use cases that are required, right? It's not verifiable. We know it's less effective. It's not great UX for users who are trying to opt out, and they have to opt out on your site, and the next guy's site, the next guy's site. And they have to do it multiple times on multiple browsers and devices. And in fact, GDPR says that privacy is a human right, centered at the human being, and the human being needs accountability, transparency, and control. And making little opaque silos of privacy makes the control part of the data privacy regulation from GDPR very, very difficult. Also, doesn't make it transparent and doesn't make it accountable. So Lodomi thinks we need something better than that. But worst about the first-party only strategy is that it doesn't work for publishers. I think there are probably a few tier one publishers out there who have enough subscribers and enough premium content to drive enough revenue based on just emails and logged in users and context of the page. But for most publishers out there, and second and third tier publishers especially, we know that without third-party relevancy appended to your media, you're going to just not make as much CPM on your ad slots. And most of that money is going to be diverted to, yes, the walled gardens. So Lodomi knows, and we have invested in a common language that creates growth and value for every player in the independent open web. Introducing the Lodomi Panorama ID, the first global cookieless people-based identity solution for the open web. I'm going to dig in, but it has three main pillars that it's built on. It's people-based, it's privacy first, and it's open to all. I'm going to explain each of those. For people-based, you know, everyone knows these aren't people. These are the devices that we use. And even on that laptop, there's going to be multiple browsers. Those are the identifiers we currently count and track and target. But those aren't people. This is people. And Lodomi knows that. So we built a solution that attempts to get at that nugget of truth. We built an enriched people-based view built from web data, customer IDs, and deterministic signals. Essentially, we run a clustering algorithm across our entire global footprint, and we generate a prediction of clusters of individuals based on when they stay or move together, when these devices stay or move together. So once we've got those clusters, then we take all of the attributes appended to each of those devices, and we unify them to the individual. This drives what we call unified audience matching. And this is a very exciting and very effective capability that our clients who have got this enabled are already taking advantage of. Essentially, what happens is we leverage all of the attributes across all of the touch points of an individual and qualify that individual for audiences, not just devices. The example I use is, let's say the audience is defined as one attribute red and attribute blue. So the definition has an and in it. It's a Boolean logic anded behavior or audience. And let's say that on my laptop, I have the behavior blue, and on my phone, I have the behavior red. Before unified audience matching and without people-based clustering, neither device would have qualified for that audience, even though I did, because I have both attributes. But now that Lodomi is clustering all of these attributes to an individual ID, both those attributes are clustered to me, and then I qualify for the audience, and all of my devices qualify for the audience too. A people-based, individual-centric targeting capability that drives better value and better outcomes for our publishing and marketer clients. So great. What is the scale? We have the 1.3 billion individual clusters across the world, covering all of our major regions, including the Asia Pacific region. On each individual cluster, we have an average of 5.26 devices clustered to it. That's first-party cookies, third-party cookies, MAIDs, OTT, and CTV devices. That basically breaks down into 72% browsers and 28% mobile, with a little bit of OTT in there. And attributes, and here's the really important bit. The Lodomi Panorama ID isn't an empty identifier. It doesn't just travel around like a cookie. It actually comes with enrichment data appended. So the average individual cluster has about 120 privacy-safe web attributes and 90 privacy-safe mobile attributes. This audience matching, along with these attributes, increases the addressability of high-value audiences for our publisher and marketer clients by 200 to 400%. All right, I'm going to move on because I don't have much time. Privacy first. The Lodomi Panorama ID is privacy first because Lodomi believes that consent should work the way consumers think it does, and you should be able to prove it. Right now, in a siloed privacy world where everyone only ever maintains their own sense of the consent of a user has to go to each individual domain on each individual browser or MAID and opt out. Then they have to do it again when the browser company or device manufacturer decides they would like to decide what your consent setting is, and they erase your consent setting for that domain. No more. Lodomi's Panorama ID provides the ability for a user to opt out on a single device clustered to them, and that signal being propagated across all the devices clustered to them, and then up and down the chain. Lodomi's vendors down the chain and partners up the chain. Lodomi Panorama ID delivers transparency and privacy compliance in action. What we do is we insist that a browser will have active consent to be in the graph, and that when one or any of the devices or browsers clustered to that individual opts out, we will opt out all the rest of the devices. Essentially, we insist on active consent for the graph, and we propagate negative consent reactively. We opt out on only one device, and we opt out all of the devices known to be you. Active consent means no assumptions. We require active consent to be in the graph, and then we will, when we receive a negative consent signal, we will opt out all of the devices linked to that individual, and this is just a graph showing that. All right, the Lodomi Panorama ID is open to all. What do I mean by that? Right now, we see a shift happening. If you look at today, the pink part of this graph is the authenticated users. Part of this is all sort of what's addressable on the internet today. There's some portion of the internet that's addressable through the IDL or Live Intent or Brightpool or other email-based targeting solutions in your market. Then there's the part of the internet that's recognized by third-party cookies. And then finally, there's the non-authenticated part, that part that's primarily first-party. And for the most part, there's no solution to address those users. Well, soon that blue bit's going to go away, and it will be a larger portion of the internet that will be authenticated, and a much, much larger portion that will be non-authenticated. We need some way to make that inventory addressable. Lodomi is building the Lodomi Panorama ID provides a solution to address that 80 to 90% of consumers. The open to all portion means that we're interoperable. Lodomi is in the ecosystem right now saying, hey, Zeotab, hey, IDL, hey, Newstar, let's be interoperable. Let's insist that our clients can use both IDs, and when they see them together, they can link them. And the only thing we ask of you partners is that if we send you an opt-out signal for this particular identifier, you must opt it out on your side as well. This graph here on this page is to talk about what we think the Panorama ID really sits in this portfolio play, right? So Lodomi is saying, look, we're interoperable with all the IDs together. Together, we've got to address this entire pie. If the pink part of the pie, the authenticated part, is this bottom bit of your sales funnel, meaning you've already met those persons, they've sold you, you've sold them something, they're on your newsletter, you know them, and you're going to retarget them. And those emails are going to help you with that retargeting strategy. But the top and mid part of the funnel are folks you don't know yet, and you're going to need to be able to address them. And Load.me Panorama ID helps with the top and the mid part of the funnel by addressing that 80 to 90% of the internet that is not authenticated. So it's the Load.me Panorama ID is capable or addressable in all browser environments and all domain device and platforms. This means that if Facebook decides tomorrow to accept the Panorama ID and to pass it out on campaign logs, the Load.me Panorama ID supports that capability. We are making our case to all of the major entities in the PRAM, the Partnership for Responsible Addressable Media, to adopt our identifier and start giving users a control, transparency, and accountability in terms of privacy, and make the open web ad-supported and free. Finally, why choose a Load.me Panorama ID? Because it comes with enriched audiences, it's global and accurate, it offers transparency to consumer privacy, to consumers. There's no charge to access or use the Panorama ID, and it's interoperable with all of the other identifiers out there in the ecosystem. We're very excited about this capability. We're seeing its work in action with our beta customers. We would like all of our clients on this call to immediately upgrade to the cartographer, the lightning tag, to get to the best tag and the best graphing solution we have, and then to either enable the user ID module if you're a publisher so that you can start flooding the bid stream with our Panorama ID, or request to purchase your campaigns on the Panorama ID from your DSPs and SSPs if you're a brand or marketer client. So thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation. Looking forward to hearing all of your questions towards the end of this. And I'll now pass it to Susana Urbana, our Director of Head of Data Solutions in APAC, for her panel with these great folks.
Thank you for the intro, Pierre. Hi, everyone. On today's panel, we will be discussing how publishers, brands, agencies, and technology companies in APAC region are preparing for cookieless future. To represent the publishers, I would like to welcome Andrew Brain, Director of Audience Intelligence at 7 West Media. From technology partners, we have Peter Barry, who is the Regional Director ANZ and Head of Audience APAC at PubMatic. To represent agencies, we have Sanil Narayani, Vice President of Commercials and Partnerships at Denso APAC. And lastly, we have Simon Samuel, Head of Data Analytics at ADA, represents Axiata Group. Gentlemen, thank you for agreeing to be on today's panel. Kind of to kick off this session, I would like to start by addressing some of the blind spots and knowledge gaps in identity solutions that we are kind of seeing amongst the buyers and sellers in this region. Peter, let me start with you. Where do you think we have the most to learn, and what are the kind of common myths that we should bust right now?
Sure. Hi, Susanna, and thank you very much for allowing me to join you today. Hope, or good to see everybody safe and well. Just before I say anything, I'd like to congratulate Sunil for winning AdTech Personality of the Year for APAC at the Wires. Well done on that, Sunil. Great news. So yeah, just to answer the question in terms of what we need to learn, there's a whole bunch of stuff. We've got 12 months before the third-party cookie deprecates in Chrome, and there are a whole raft of solutions out there. So yeah, we have a ton to learn, and it's great to see the presentation on Panorama ID today. And I guess what I would recommend is that any marketer, agency, publisher picks up the phone and calls their identity solutions or their identity vendors, such as Load.me, and asks them to open the kimono, so to speak, on their ID solution. Look at the product roadmap, look at how it works, check to see if it's interoperable. That's extremely important. So that's the first bit of advice I would give, is to learn as much as you can, as quickly as you can. I noted that there was a question from Andrew Davies during the session, and he said he's not clear on identity linking from looking at Apple's T's and C's. So clearly there's a need for education there. So the onus is on us as an industry to help with that. And also we should look very closely at Google's privacy sandbox and see, will it advantage Google or will it be fair for all? So the onus is on all of us to do that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Peter. Sunil, probably next question would be to you. How would you advise marketers, agencies, as well as publishers to vet these type of providers and kind of do the best due diligence they can on the identity solution?
Firstly, thank you, Susanna, and the Ludemy team for having me here. Appreciate the comment, Peter. Yeah, it's been a good, I guess, recognition at the end of the year. So I think coming on to the question, Susanna, the first thing, pretty much what Peter as well mentioned, that there's a lot of talk around identity, but I guess the overall understanding is fairly low on, firstly, there are a lot of solutions, and then the other one is how do you really assess them or vet them for kind of usage. When we are speaking to our clients or marketers, I think the first thing that we're trying to explain to them is that there is two kinds of identities that essentially exist. One is within their own setup. So let's call it the first party of the clients, and how are we kind of using that for marketing. And then the other one that always existed in a way, which is, let's say, the cookie world, right? Where you have some common identifier within the industry, which now can be kind of bridged between the client's first party or identifier and then bridged into the industry. So I think we're trying to break that down firstly for our clients. And I think things are going all right within the first party, conversations, because all of our clients are kind of geared in, putting the right market stacks in place to kind of collect and also segment first party. Now, talking about the wider industry, I think things are looking difficult. We always knew cookie has been kind of, it's a brittle identity still, right? And now we're in a space where we need to kind of find one common solution. So what we are lastly talking to our publishers and partners, which are both end publisher, content owners, as well as SSPs and yourselves like data providers, is kind of collaborate a little faster, have a better common language where there is a lot more interoperability. Otherwise, scale is something that always gets hampered. So the few things that we are looking at is definitely the product roadmap. What are the ways in which you're collecting data and what your data strategy is? Are you respecting consumer privacy? And is it a design for privacy kind of a setup for the longer term? Aside to that, I think some of the other things that we'll be looking at is what is the commercial model driving that? Because if I take a step back and zoom out, none of this should be driven commercially. It should be more collaborative for the industry. And finally, looking at any solution that we are using, how much scale do they drive in terms of attributes, IDs, and geographies? Those are the things that we'll be looking at. And I guess a quick word to the publishers, because the longer tail publishers are the ones that may see the brunt to a much larger extent, because they probably are not tech ready. They haven't had a login page. They can authenticate users. So they got to work that out a little better and not rely completely on the ad tech partners who've been fueling their revenue so far.
Sorry, just if I could add to that, Sunil, I think that's a great point. What we're facing here potentially is like a homogenization of the internet if we don't get this right. So yeah, those mid-level to smaller publishers and that great diversity of content that we love from the internet is what's at stake here. So I think that's a really good point.
I agree. So perhaps, Andrew, you would be able to answer this question. When we kind of look at the educations on the topic, what do you believe is required to kind of educate internally as well as externally to the clients for the likes of publishers? What are the steps that you guys need to take?
Yeah, I guess the first thing from a publisher perspective is that, when obviously the cookie Armageddon was announced, it was okay. So what's happening to the industry, and really sort of educating the value of the first party cookie first and foremost. I think back into the business and really trying to understand that the context is king. When it comes to content, and driving audiences across a digital ecosystem. I think. From an ID perspective within a business like 7 West Media, it's really trying to identify and educate around what ID is, what identity is, and because it's known in lots of different forms. We're calling it sort of people-based marketing. we have an ID that we've created within 7 West Media, which is the swim ID, which is essentially how we're appending all sort of different digital signals back to a particular ID. So, but for us, it's not really about talking about IDs. It's trying to humanize an ID internally, and to actually show what IDs look like, within our own business, about how we can start to identify what an audience looks like off the back of the ID. So how does that sort of drive insights? How does that drive strategy? And how does that drive better outcomes for brands? And I guess that's just from a commercial lens, but also internally is how do we use identity to drive better outcome decisions, business decisions across our business. So if it's better marketing or better content programming, just name a few, and said on also the insights piece as well.
Fantastic. When we look at, and Sam, this could be a question for you. Do you think the identity brings us closer to the holy grail of attribution?
Yeah, definitely. It's so at ADA, we see the identity as the core foundation to all the capabilities, the AI data capabilities we look to develop. We are currently constrained by the current walled gardens. Lots of solutions out there, but they're very, very disparate. So our challenge then is how do we just develop those underlying core foundations? And the conversations we have with Lotame and a number of our partners, all about developing those foundations. And there's still probably lots of challenges with lots of our clients at the moment about driving through attribution. Some of the solutions we're looking to develop, looking at online, offline attribution, so looking at the holistic view of the consumer, and true identity will just get us into that space. But to really drive innovation, I think we just need these underlying foundations in place.
Absolutely. And this kind of brings me to kind of my next question now. I mean, I'm more than sure that people who kind of joined this call, they would love to understand how your companies are preparing now to basically navigate the online identity and cookie challenge world. Peter, would you like to give us a bit of an kind of insight as to how PubMatic is preparing for cookie challenged world?
Sure. So we've been working with the wider industry for quite some time now. I mean, Chrome made their announcement, let's say 12 months ago. Before that, obviously Safari and Firefox were already doing their thing. So we built a solution called Identity Hub, which is basically an identity management solution for publishers. It allows them to select which ID partner they'd like to use. They can manage it. They can run monetization reports and so on. Essentially, we're working with a bunch of customers. So we're ID agnostic. We're working with Lotame on your Panorama ID, which is awesome. So our job really is to facilitate the identification of that user. And so phase 2 of that development is now about getting publishers and buyers to start using those ID solutions to test and learn well in advance of the end of 2021. And so that's a big focus for us at the moment.
I'd like to actually dig deeper into this one. Are you seeing kind of very good response rate and uptake from the publishers specifically across this region?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen APAC actually is our #1 region from a percentage perspective of publishers using the solution. It's quite easy. It's built on pre-bid, so it's open source. We're big believers of that. Again, it's interoperable. And so, yeah, we've seen a huge uptake across this region. We've seen some great results against non-cookied traffic, which can lead to gains right now on Safari and Firefox traffic, and obviously down the line on Chrome. So yeah, we have seen quite a significant uptake.
Fantastic. Sunil, from agency point of view, what is Dentsu doing to kind of future-proof their business post 2021?
Well, I think it's a great question, Susanna. I mean, there are quite a few work streams that we are looking at, and then largely they would classify as things that we are trying to build on our own, which are kind of proprietary to Dentsu. But again, at the same time, solutions that we are working with our partners, like let's say the privacy sandbox or clean rooms that we can build with the walled gardens. I mean, look, there's no challenge there on behavioral targeting or measurement of frequency capping. because most of these guys have scaled deterministic data. And there is a sizable amount of spends from our clients that kind of goes there. So those kind of things are being built on and kind of being more, I guess, standardized, and there's a level of maturity that we are now reaching at when we are offering these solutions to the clients. So those are kind of the the walled garden solutions. But coming back to the stuff that we're doing internally, there's a lot of effort from our Merkle teams around Mercury ID, where largely that becomes an identifier of our own, where we essentially will look at all the publishers and the other ad tech players that play within the supply chain and try and understand how we can match and expand what we can use for insights and planning. At the same time, we have another solution called Dentsu Curate that was launched sometime last quarter. Now, I guess with Curate, what you're trying to do is ensure, number one, that there's direct access to the publishers, and hence the inventory is coming directly and it's more transparent and high quality. But I guess the conversation then moves on to what kind of data can be passed on to our systems. And then it's largely working with the end publishers to, again, grow the circle and then deduplicate a lot of the stuff that we're doing. So that's going to be under Curate Audiences soon. So quite a few things happening, but all in all, I guess the key fact that we understand is that if identity is lost in a way, impressions are valued 50% less, which means that the open wide web is at the threat, and there's a lot more that'll get pushed into the walled gardens. So we're trying to balance things out and find the best solutions for our clients, essentially, on what will deliver the bang at the buck or the ROI from their ad spends.
I think quite a few small publishers will struggle to kind of deliver out on some of the kind of objectives that they usually deliver out on post 2022 if they don't, onboard stuff and get the people-based ID solution in place. Andrew, from your point of view, what are the kind of steps that publishers should start taking right now to future-proof their business post 2021?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that publishers should be doing is creating the really good, strong, reciprocal, two-way relationships with all sort of ad tech, martech partners that they have within their business. I think now has never been a more important time to make sure you're working towards a common goal. I think for traditional digital publishers, I don't know if traditional digital publishers is the right terminology, but I'd say sort of publishers who have gone from a magazine environment into the digital space. There's a huge opportunity there. I think from understanding the data that is within those businesses that might not necessarily have been explored previously, but I think there's a huge opportunity for publishers to be able to check on what they've got and see how that works within an identity vendor or partner, and how you actually plug in against that.
Absolutely. And Simon, when you kind of put on your marketeer's hat, what are your thoughts there?
So from our context, as ATA engages our clients, across different industries, and some of our key clients and our core heritage is around the telco industry. So some of our solutions are really looking at some of the risk appetite of some of our clients. Obviously from a telco perspective, data privacy is key, similar with our banking clients. So we just need to understand where on that risk spectrum do we want to be around identity, and how we develop some of our audiences and some of the suppliers we work with to, we typically are developing a hybrid model. So develop some of our own internal capability, so deterministic and probabilistic modeling on some of our clients or internal data. And then that's working very closely with some of our third-party providers as well, just making sure we've got that complete view of our consumer base. So we adapt our model to our clients and their risk appetite, but it's really about that hybrid model. It's really trying to create that identity graph and how we actually develop that with our core partners.
Brilliant, thank you. I think everybody's been looking at trade press and all the news, and we all know that there has been quite a few different identity solutions that has launched recently in this region and globally as well. So I just wanted to kind of get, everybody is on the panels, your point of view on is it identity kind of winner takes all kind of solution, or would you kind of recommend, from your perspective, more of a portfolio approach? Peter, do you want to take it?
Yeah, so I think initially there'll be a whole bunch of potential solutions. And like I said earlier on, people, marketers, advertisers, publishers will kick the tires on those, and they'll discover which ones are effective and which ones aren't. And so then probably we'll have a smaller number of scaled solutions. What we don't need is, well, we probably do need it, but we don't necessarily want a single solution that's driven by a commercial organization. I think we've discovered in the past and present that being too reliant on one company can be bad for business and bad for diversity and that sort of stuff. So we don't want that. So I think there'll be a small number of viable scaled solutions, which will hopefully then be able to communicate across solutions. I guess the danger is that we will have some very big walled gardens. We all know who they are. And then we'll have a bunch of smaller walled gardens, some broadcasters and bigger publishers who follow their own path and create their own solution. And so you have like a tier 2 of walled gardens, and then you have everybody else. And I think that's the outcome we do not want to get to. We want a common language across all of those different players. And I'd be interested in Brainy's view on that kind of area when you've got a bunch of broadcasters or very valuable audiences, and they don't necessarily speak to each other, and there's a problem with frequency capping and that sort of stuff across that ecosystem. I mean, I was reading, I think it was just yesterday, that Singapore Press Holdings are pursuing their own strategy around identity, and so the hope would be that they are speaking to the wider community about not just going it alone, but being part of a bigger solution. So that was a long-winded way of giving you my answer.
Thank you, Peter. Andrew?
Yeah, I think from a brand and marketer's point of view, I think a single solution would be utopia, if you know what I mean. Because we've all got history in it, and we've seen the walled gardens and the behemoths sort of play in that space, and and they're easy to work with, or deemed easy to work with. I think from a publisher's perspective, and but yeah, going back into the Swim ID, we've created our own ID ecosystem. Obviously, that works very well across Seven West Media, and I think from an ID perspective, even though we have got that particular ID, there are identity providers we will work with. That there's heaps of them out there, and I think it's a bit of a land grab at the moment, and I think in time that will condense somewhat. And then we'll get a truer view of those identity partners that we will work with. But at Seven West Media, we've got a bit of a methodology at the moment. It's really around sort of plug and play your way. So we're not sort of we will work with brands and their identity solutions where and how we can. I'm not saying we're going to be able to work with all of them, because as you know, if you're going to do a lot of setups with identity, there is cost, and a lot of the time from a publisher's perspective, that's it's quite a lot of cost. So it's just trying to really sort of manage who are the best providers to work with.
Of course. Simon, what are your thoughts?
Yes, well, we work with clients across the region, so we try to be solution or technology agnostic in the way we support our clients. So we have to address multiple solutions in this space. Ideally, it would be great if we have one unified solution. However, I think just greater convergence or interoperability, persistency of IDs, just get that common language where we can actually drive efficiencies within the way we support our clients. Our vision is just to really drive AI, user experience, customer experience for our clients, rather than just spend all our time working on the core foundation. So interoperability between solution providers, I think, is perhaps the way to go.
Perfect, thank you. Sanil, from your perspective, from agency background?
Well, I think from an agency perspective, I honestly feel that the digital ecosystem is quite fragmented. So even if we wish we had one single clear winner, I think that's going to be like a difficult one really to achieve in the short term. So it has to be, it will be collaboration, and it should be, given what we've already seen with most of the ad tech and the publisher community now trying to find a solution because they just don't have a choice, because some decisions are made at the browser level. So it needs to be a more collaborative one. And I guess what's pretty much what Peter mentioned and what Andrew mentioned is that we hope that the solution is not only commercially driven. It's more for the industry such that it can benefit everybody. At the same time, you have some really large broadcasters, publishers who are developing their own, which is the right thing to do. So we're 7 in Australia, we have Times in India, we have MediaCorp SPH, somebody mentioned now, in Singapore. But again, what's going to happen is that it's right for them to do that, because let's say there's a large campaign that comes their way, they have a lot more control on optimization and planning, which is fine. But I guess when you zoom out a bit and when you want to have a wider campaign at play, it becomes extremely challenging for us as agencies or clients kind of to pinpoint what is the best solution. So it needs to be a common language. Hopefully it's a more collaborative effort essentially. And it also tells us that the ad tech industry is maturing, and it's not about that one single winner or a mid-sized winner, but kind of having a common language all across.
Brilliant, thank you.
Just adding to that, sorry, Susanna, I think APAC is a very unique market because you have like a bunch of different markets that are very different in terms of their advancement around data. And so I think that leads to its own set of challenges, where in the US, obviously, you've got essentially one single market, and in Europe, most of the markets are quite advanced or around the same level. So APAC really has its own set of unique challenges. And again, the onus is on us to be able to solve those problems.
I suppose my next question to this topic would be, Simon, perhaps to you. What is your take on hashed emails being used as the basis of ID models? I mean, we've kind of talked previously around the regulations. So do you think there is a longevity as a standalone solution considering kind of the new privacy regulations on the horizon, especially when you're just using the hashed emails within the ID models?
Yeah, I think some of the key challenges. So when you look at emails or hashed emails, they're ubiquitous everywhere. So whether you're going online e-commerce, whether you work with first parties, third parties, social media, email is the common identifier. So we can't just throw it out without really understanding what would replace the hashed email. So it's really about understanding, could you encrypt the email, the consent around the email, and the email by itself won't be the key driver of the ID graph. We need to have a look at other solutions as well when you look at the growth around mobile use cases with less reliance on some of the email. So we need to bear in mind the regulation, but I think in the short term, I think the hashed email is here, especially around first party data and data ID.
Perfect. And of course, some of the publishers and also some of the marketers, they may not have as scalable database of hashed emails to actually use in the ID solution. So I think it's going to be very important to look at other identifiers within the solution to kind of pin it all together. But yeah, I agree.
I do think on that, Susanna, that it is a bit of a rush at the moment to I think build a solution that you can get as many emails as possible. From a 7 perspective, from 7 Plus, our streaming platform, we've made the move to go to mandatory sign-in for any sort of VOD content, because it's just that time to go pretty hard in that email space right now before any of those changes come through.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I think just to add to Andrew, the thing is that within some of the APAC markets, with the burst of OTT, you are asked to sign in, and hence that's an easy way for the publishers to get a lot of email signed in information. So I mean, it actually it could be that some of the developing markets, let's say Southeast Asia, might emerge much faster because the number of people getting on their phones every day is massive, and then and we have a very AWOD setup here. So people just exchange their email IDs or logins, feel free to see ads. So I do think that it's going to take a while where we reach a sizable mass for the authenticated email ID hashed conversation. But I guess until then, there will be a lot of cohort working, which will happen from most of the publishers which are large enough with scale. And essentially, it will be termed as some common identifier as a replacement for a cookie or a better syncing aspect of a cookie, or probably a competition to a walled garden, which will get into play now or very, very soon.
And this very nicely ties me to probably the next question that I had, actually specifically for Andrew. We know that, as just mentioned, many publishers are doubling down on their first-party data collection to future-proof their business. But from your perspective, Andrew, how would you kind of advise them on this strategy and where the kind of identity solutions could either augment or kind of complement their monetization?
Yeah, I think we're pretty fortunate at 7west Media because we do have a big sort of digital web business with West Australian, which has now got a pretty significant sign-in and subscription front door to it. So we're sort of putting in a lot of that sort of SSI. And I said from a BVOT perspective, we're now clawing as many emails as possible. But that's the future for us right now. But I think it's from a publisher perspective around identity. It's not always about. And from my point of view, it's not always just about around activation. Activation is very important to us. That's commercialization of it. It's more around how do you actually use that identity to actually inform insight and drive understanding around audience. Which is, as I said before, insights drive strategy drive outcome for brands. So, and I think from a publisher perspective, you might be a little bit hamstrung without that real rich first party data. There is an opportunity to be able to plug in against different identities. So to give you more of an imbued form of an insight of an audience, because that's what brands will buy against. Brands will buy against insight, so, and then it's about the activation piece of that.
Absolutely. In terms of adoption rates, do you think they're quite important when it actually comes as a business to decide which of the ID solutions you guys are going to be partnering with? Peter, from your perspective, I suppose you are open to all because you want to kind of have as much connectivity, but correct me if I'm wrong.
We're open to all, but there needs to be some sort of demand. Generally, right now, that is buyer-led. If a specific buyer says they want to work with Panorama ID, then we will speak with Loname and we will onboard those ID solutions. So right now it's kind of buyer and publisher led. It's not so much about scale at this point, but certainly I think 2021 will be about, well, who's got scale, and they'll be the players that we will continue to work with and get behind, because there has to be some form of consolidation at a point, because we can't, as an industry, we can't work with everyone. As a business, Pubmatic can, but as an industry, we can't. So I think that's important. And also, just on Andrew's point around advice for publishers, I think it's really great for Seven and some of the bigger publishers having that relationship with their users and that logged in data or logged in experience. I think, though, again, the mid to long tail of publishers are at risk here. And again, that's where Loname will come right in to the equation and help those retain and increase the lifeblood, which is the programmatic income that they're getting that allows them to create that content.
Absolutely. Anyone else wants to chip in, or shall we move on to the next question? Perfect. Just cautious of the time, I actually do have a questions for all of our panelists. And given that we are in December, it's the end of 2020, I'd love to hear from each and every one of you as to what are your three kind of top 2021 predictions. Who would you like to go first? Peter?
Sure, I'll go first. I'll make them brief. I think we've got maybe 7-8 minutes left. So first is I feel 2021, we'll start seeing subscription fatigue. So just looking at the broader video environment, during lockdown, I think everybody signed up for every possible service they could. I think I've got 8 services right now. When some of the free trials end, I think, and probably purse strings will tighten a little bit. I think we'll start seeing people pulling back on the paid for services and getting behind more advertising funded services. And I think that's a great opportunity for broadcasters and publishers. Second trend is we'll see header bidding for OTT and CTV really gain traction. It's done great things for display, and for different reasons it will ramp across OTT and CTV, I think probably from middle way through the year. So that's going to be huge to capitalize on that opportunity I just touched on. And then the third thing we'll see is towards the end of the year, I think we'll start seeing some magic happen at the intersection of identity and audience. We've been talking about it this entire time, identity. I think we really need to get excited about the opportunity that it represents, to be able to do a fantastic job for the next 10, 20 years, and have a solution that works across all devices long term, which the cookie was never supposed to be. But they're mine.
Thank you. Simon?
Well, for me, the first one is just the continuation of the e-commerce growth, on the back of COVID, and just looking at the rebalance then between traditional bricks and mortar and e-commerce capability that our clients will create. The second key thing I think we'll see is greater trust in digital. When you look at the markets, especially in Southeast Asia, where we see check-ins for retailers, on the back of COVID. So I think that there's going to be a lot more growth in the digitization, the use of e-wallets, and with us, we're focusing on as well around how we use that increased trust around online and offline attribution. And then the final one is just the growth in AI and data. How do we actually drive value for our clients? Not just in audience selection, but on things like creative optimization and all of those capabilities. So a big growth in the AI and data capability.
Absolutely. Sunil?
I think from the predictions, the first thing that I feel is, there will be a lot more connected experiences. So we would see the AdTech and the MarTech gap kind of being bridged a lot more. It's going to all come a lot more closer. Which also means that you will see a lot more around emails and notifications and owned platforms doing a lot more alongside the paid platforms in a more seamless manner. I think that's one. I also, agree that commerce and DTC brands are going to be kind of taking in charge, reaching the consumers directly. So a lot more growth expected on commerce and essentially gaming as well, given the kind of numbers that we're seeing these days, which essentially is that the market is growing, but the advertising is still not keeping up to pace. So there will be a lot more maturity on the gaming advertising kind of ecosystem. And, if I could kind of go a bit lateral onto a separate topic for the third prediction, I think we might just see 3+2, which is, rather than a 5-day working in office, you might have probably 3 days in office and 2 days work from home, which is kind of a healthy balance. So that's from my end.
Fantastic. Andrew?
3 quick things from me. I think, first of all, the Olympics will happen in July. And Seven West Media will we are very much and Seven West Media will surpass, I would say, probably 12 million IDs within our ecosystem, which would be huge. I think the BVOD players will start to take on YouTube together. That's my prediction, and then the third one is a little bit of hope that QR codes will disappear pretty quickly, especially from TV. But then I also see the e-com and measurement growth through TV, especially through connected TV.
Yeah, brilliant. I think those are all kind of very good predictions. I think just to add, probably from my point of view, would be, I think we are going to see more countries actually modeling their privacy laws after GDPR, which means the privacy will be the competitive advantage of 2021. And I think anything that is, especially when you can think about the privacy, when it's interlocked with identity solution that embraces data minimization, kind of non-PII approach, as well as true privacy design, that should be something that's going to be key across next year. Apart from the walled gardens, which I completely agree with you guys, and I think we've mentioned it throughout the session, I also do think that Amazon might become the new power player in the digital ecosystem, ad ecosystem, and really give Google and Facebook run for their money. And given that they've got a wealth of, shopper data, they can measure and help the advertisers to measure their ROI. I think they're in a much better position to kind of start getting some money on those advertising dollars. And I think we are going to see more and more advertisers in this region start using Amazon, as well as, the likes of Shopee and Lazada and all the other guys. But definitely I think that we should watch out for Amazon to become bigger and get that share from the likes of Facebook and Google. Brilliant. So I think we are just about on time. So just to kind of close this lovely panel off, I think it's great to see that there is some really good common themes amongst all of us on the panel. That there is definitely a need for industry collaboration, especially when it comes to creating connected ecosystem that is supported by shareable, privacy-compliant, people-based ID solutions that really can create a common language for both buyers and sellers to start transacting on the cross-channel targeting. So with this said, I would like to thank our panelists for their valuable input and for their time, and now pass it back to Alex and Andy. And I believe there are also some Q&A questions after Andy's closing speech. Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much to all the panelists who joined us today and covered such great content. We'll invite Andy as well as Pierre to come back on.
I want to, first off, if I could, we answered a lot of questions, and just out of curiosity, can everybody see the questions that we were able to answer? Everybody, all the participants can, right, Alex? Can see the questions, or is it just us?
Yep. Yeah, everyone should be able to see the questions and the answers.
So in the spirit of transparency, I wanted to address a couple things. First off, I want to thank the panel so much for doing what they did, for participating. Simon, Sunil, Andrew, and Peter, thank you so much for your participation and for your great contributions. What I want to say is a couple things. One is, what we're focused on, and I want this to be taken away from this, is the interoperability of what Lotame brings to the table. A lot of the IDs that are out in the marketplace are really almost like a walled garden. You got to use that ID and that's it. What we're looking to do is be an enrichment solution to the identity question, which is simply put, we will work with any ID. Trade Desk Unified 2.0, LiveRamp, ID5, anyone in the marketplace that says they have an ID, it is not a one size fits all. This is not, I have to use one ID and one ID only. There will be multiple flavors. So if you are a publisher or an agency, it is incumbent upon you to develop this data strategy that we're talking about, because there will be multiple players in this space to add value to your business. That's number one. Number two, clarity. And I want to emphasize this because it really differentiates us. Over the next 2 to 4 weeks, I encourage you to reach out to your client success rep if you're a customer, or to one of the market leaders in your marketplace, whether it's Guarev or Luke or Fred or whoever it is. Reach out to your marketplace leader in those markets, because we have a video where we literally show you how we do this. We show you the script. We show you how we manage the probabilistic graph. We show you how we create the cluster. We show you, and this is critically important as well, today most of what we spoke about was programmatic value. Today most of what we spoke about was how to create value in the advertising and marketing tech space around using identity and data. right? In a broken landscape. The one thing we really didn't touch on, although it was talked about, was could we use, and can your company use what we've discussed around privacy and consent propagation? I want you to think about that. Everything we've talked about, primarily in this Zoom, has been the furtherance of advertising and the customer journey and activation. But can the very same probabilistic graph work in a privacy world where strings need to be passed across device and across people and across clusters when it's broken? The short answer is yes. So if your company or your agency or as a publisher, you don't want to use Panorama, I get it. But you're going to need a probabilistic graph to prove that you are pushing with the best of intent privacy consent strings across browser, across device, and across customers. Pierre, is there anything I'm leaving out of that part that you want to emphasize?
No, I think you summed it up really well, Andy. Lodomy is open to all is a really important part of the way. I think Peter was right in the sense that there's going to shake out some of the IDs are going to shake out. We're very confident in ours because of the fact that it's enriched, it's not empty, that it will provide a means by which to address the top and mid part of the funnel. So most of the IDs out there, both from the agency holding groups and the big for pay IDs like the live ramp identifier and others, are based on authenticated users or emails. And like my graph says, that's very good for retargeting for the bottom of the funnel. But for that rest of the awareness campaigns and consideration campaigns, there must be a way to bring relevancy to the media that you're addressing. And we think that our identifier and the enrichment data that goes along with it will be an excellent piece of your portfolio ID approach to address the top and mid part of the funnel.
And let me say a couple more things. One is, it should be easy to engage with us. If you have any questions on how to engage with us, you can either call your rep. We're in pre-bid. You could grab us in the pre-bid module. There's an easy way to engage this. But if you're a publisher or a current client, we're going to be force feeding our new tag to all of our customers in the early part of 2021. And simply put, by March 1st of 2021, our entire client base, our entire DMP and data exchange client base will be Lightning tag enabled, which means you will be Panorama ID enabled. We are moving toward the cookieless world. This is the equivalent of everyone using horses to get around in the third-party cookie world. We're mandating our customers by the automobile. It's the same thing. It is really the same thing in a digital advertising landscape. If you have any questions, you can email Panorama ID at lodomy.com. Again, it's Panorama ID at lodomy.com. And that way, we will answer questions the way we did in the Q&A. And I encourage you to copy and paste that Q&A for those of you that would like to share it with your organization, because you'll find a lot of information in there that are really great questions about how does it work with Unified ID? How do you work with LiveRamp? Do you take deterministic signals? It's all answered. The short answer is yes. Again, we want to be open. We want to be transparent. We want to be honest. And we want to work with everybody on the web and prove our viability. And really, that's really it. I think we're pretty much done. Alex, do you have any closing comments before we wrap up?
No, again, just wanted to say thank you to everybody. I think we definitely saw some themes in the questions that came in today. Thank you, Pierre, for tackling all those live. I know we were gonna leave those to the end, but there were so many great questions that came in live. We wanted to make sure to address them. So hopefully you guys were able to follow along. If not, then don't worry. We will be including them in a readout, in an executive summary that we'll send around as well. So thank you everybody who has tuned in morning, afternoon, evening, and we look forward to chatting with you guys further. Have a nice day.
Have a great end of the year, everybody, and thank you for being a part of this.
Take care. Take care all.